or earlier this year. And actually, one of the things that we didn't discuss or talk about was some of the failures of some of the NATO countries. And some of them have actually come to fruition, as we talked about how the UK couldn't intercept ballistic missiles, the same as France. A couple of others were unable to do that last week. But one of the other failings that they found from the exercise, there was a number of failures for the NATO militaries, each different military. Another one of those was that the French military have to figure out how to actually get their troops across in 10 days. Now, I looked on Google Maps. It's about a 20-hour drive if you're just by yourself by car. But that's not quite the way that tank transporters and moving large convoys of military equipment works. So what's tended to happen previously in a lot of conflicts is that they would be moved by train. That's going to be a little more tricky to get the troops across from France over to Romania by train. So they're looking at land options, roads, and that sort of thing. We'll actually look at that on the shared screen. I've got some articles to show you here. So this is out of Remix. They go with quite a strong headline, shall we say. Paris prepares for WW3. Thousands of French soldiers ready to arrive in Romania for a simulated, remove the word simulated, and you've got a more accurate response here, for a conflict with Russia. They said, we used to play war, now there's a designated enemy. And this was from Hungarian news outlet, and they pointed out that the moves from France show Paris is preparing for a world war. The pro-war French president has already come up with alarming plans in recent months, which could clearly lead to a war between NATO and Russia. As reported earlier, Macron did not rule out sending troops to Ukraine either. Regardless of the potential threats of an open conflict with Russia, NATO seems to be preparing for that possibility. And I would actually agree with most of this here. That's why Steadfast Defender took place earlier in the year. And as we know, Macron was the leader that actually came before the council and said, we want to put boots on the ground. Basically, he did a war cry. Who's with me to put Western troops on the ground? And there was crickets, because what we're seeing at the moment is NATO allies, European countries, they don't actually want to put boots on the ground. This is a political as opposed to a military move. It's because there's a lot of elections coming up, a lot have just taken place, and that's why we're actually seeing the UK being more forceful. French elections have also taken place. We have German elections haven't yet taken place. The AfD is rising in popularity. There's a lot of concerns around Europe because of the elections that are coming up. But this is one of the reasons why you're not seeing them putting boots on the ground. But as more elections actually take place, I think we could be pushing closer to that. So instead, what's happening is Western countries are using Ukraine, as we talked about before, as their proxy for a conflict with Russia. And that's why they're sending the equipment, sending the money, because you either send troops or you send weapons and money. So that's what we are seeing. And we're also, as a third part to this, we're seeing the defense manufacturers, weapon manufacturers around the world also using Ukraine as a sort of unethical battleground, shall we say, for all of their next level weapons. We're seeing the dogs we talked about now, the robot dogs on the battlefield being tested. We're seeing the drones. We're seeing all sorts of things now being tested there, which is what we talked about here on the channel about 2 or 3 years ago, that we would see. And it wasn't necessarily Ukraine, but I talked about how we'd see one of 3 conflicts: Eastern Europe, Middle East, or China, Taiwan. We've actually seen 2 out of the 3, which is quite crazy because it's only been 2 or 3 years since we really started talking about these 3 conflicts. 2 of them have hit already, and I still believe that we'll see the China, Taiwan hit when there's chaos with the other 2 and there's distractions around the world. So I still think we're close to that taking place. If we move over to Politico then, they're leading with the headline, France's army faces deterrence test against Putin's Russia. In May, thousands of French soldiers will need to get to Romania in 10 days to test their ability to meet NATO requirements here. So this isn't French requirements, this is NATO stating this. Next year will prove a crucial test for the French army as it transforms into a force able to face Russia. In May, French soldiers will participate in a large-scale military exercise in Romania, dubbed Dacian Spring 2025, that will assess their ability to swiftly move to NATO's eastern flank. It's a key competence should Russian President Putin decide to attack an alliance member. We used to play war, now there's a designated enemy, and we train with people with whom we'd actually go to war. This is the head of the Army's Land Command for Europe, who told reporters on Friday. He said that this exercise is a strategic signal. In the past few years, France's land forces have started a profound transformation to be ready for a high-intensity conflict, similar to the war in Ukraine. I would say exactly like the war in Ukraine. The French army also has new marching orders from NATO. Again, what year did I tell you back in 2020? I said 2027. It should be able to deploy a war-ready division in 30 days, including ammunition and supplies. Moving towards that goal is at the heart of next year's exercise, top officers explained. The French army will train to send a war-ready brigade to Romania in 10 days. So that's large. A brigade is a lot of soldiers. And they said that this is an intermediary step. If successful, will reaffirm France's credibility with NATO allies and pave the ways to reach the 2027 objective. So what does a brigade have? Between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers, while a division has from 10 to 25,000. So this is probably what we're looking at. We'd be looking at the higher end of that number. So 25,000 French troops on the eastern flank then. The key challenge will be to get to Romania in such a short period of time. There's still no military Schengen, and we need to decisively improve military mobility in Europe. A 2022 first deployment of troops to Romania was dogged by red tape, which is no surprise, border procedures and trains, again, we just mentioned this, not suited to transporting military equipment. And the Express has gone for an even harsher headline with this. Macron preparing for war. They're trying to make out that it's immediate. Now, I did look at, if we take France here and we take their eastern border, and what sort of route would be taken. You could get there in, if it was just a car, you could get there in sort of 17.5 hours to central Romania. Probably a lot less if we just went to the border here. But what could be some of the snags here then? Getting through Germany, I don't think will be a problem, or Austria. But then you have Robert Fico in Slovakia, the prime minister, or you have Hungary's Orban. They'd have to go through, if they wanted to make good time, one or both of these borders. I think they could probably slip Slovakia and go through Hungary. But if that wasn't the case, it would be Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia into Romania. So I think that could be a challenge and add a lot more time to this. Out of Politico again then, France aims to send Mirage fighter jets to help Ukraine fight Putin in 2025. So Ukrainian pilots are already flying F-16s donated by countries including the Netherlands and Denmark, as we know. France aims to send French-made fighters to Kyiv in the first half of next year, and these Mirage 2000s could be flying in Ukraine in the first half of 2025. So not far away now, about 8 months, something like that, even less, could be anywhere from 3 to 8 months here. Earlier this year, Macron pledged to give these jets to Ukraine, and they're already flying F-16s in the country. The French are tweaking their jets to make them more suitable. They originally for air-to-air combat, now they want to re-equip them for ground, so air-to-ground combat capabilities, and to reinforce their electronic warfare system. But most important of all is the training of pilots and mechanics, the French minister said. Both Macron and Lecornu have repeatedly refused to disclose how many warplanes would be sent to Ukraine. They're not actually saying. And out of defense news then, Netherlands has just delivered F-16s, and they provided 440 million for drones. The Netherlands are going to be delivering more then over the coming months. 24 planes in total is what the Dutch officials have pledged. And they've also pledged 400 million euros to jointly develop and produce advanced drones for recon, defense, and attack, mainly in the air, but also on land and at sea. For the first time, I can officially announce that the Dutch F-16s have been delivered to Ukraine, he said on a post on X then. Moving over to the other side then, what the media are calling the Axis powers here. Putin and Kim Jong-un have expressed their war pact, and they're now saying it's been exposed. They love that word. But the main story that's coming out today is the North Korean soldiers and officers that were killed in an airstrike. So this is kind of big news that's taking place at the moment. And this came out of Ukraine. So Ukraine actually announced this. They said that they did a bombing run and 6 North Korean officers were killed in that bombing run, as well as 3 more soldiers. Now, you've got to ask, what exactly were they doing there? I have my own theory, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And I immediately went to, well, what is happening is Putin and North Korea, or Russia and North Korea, they have a pact, a defense pact. We know that they're not hiding that. The same is a loose pact with China and Iran. So these are the 4 sort of what they're calling the Axis powers now. And this is why what's going on is so risky and dangerous, because you now have, and it's interesting, my walk and talk on Thursday, where I mentioned Iran and Israel and the UK and France doing their U-turn on the defense pact, although it was an attack pact, and they said that actually, I know we agreed Israel, but now we're backing off. We're actually not going to attack Iran. And I said on Thursday, I thought that even though we're hearing this intense rhetoric coming out that we're going to bomb Iran into oblivion, hit their oil fields, nuclear sites and everything, I said maybe they'll hit the oil fields. I still think that's a risk, but the nuclear stuff, I don't think it's going to happen because there's no support for that. Biden came out against it. He said no way. He said absolutely no way. UK, France, pretty much most of the European allies all said no, we're not getting involved, when we're definitely not going to start bombing Iran. So this is the sort of risk here. And it was interesting because I did see some comments, and I even saw someone who's an analyst made a video about my video saying why I was wrong and Israel was about to bomb, you know, the crap out of Iran and all this. That, you know, I still stand by what I said, and we haven't seen it. Instead, Netanyahu has said that we're going to do it, but we're just waiting for the right time. I actually think that what's going to happen is they're probably not going to hit those nuclear facilities because it would escalate things a lot more. And we saw how many of those ballistic missiles actually got through. I think that was a pretty severe warning strike that happened there. So when you actually add all this up together, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China, I think they would be quite a formidable force, especially with everyone wanting to join BRICS. If there was some sort of massive conflict that broke out, you're going to see a lot of these other countries jumping on a certain side, one side or another, because of the promises of what they can get in the future with this new, what we talked about last night, the new alliance, the new economic alliance, which I think would somewhat become a military loose alliance in the future. But I think this is probably what we are looking at here. But let me just continue on with a couple of other points then. Oh, in fact, let me just, actually, I was going to touch upon why I think the North Koreans were there. Well, we know that they've been supplying certain equipment, military equipment, to Russia. One thing we're not sure of, although we have intelligence that says it, but again, I never look at the intelligence as fact, because we had intelligence of WMDs in Iraq under Saddam. And, it was ironclad, absolutely 100% certain, and it was all nonsense, right? So I never believed the intel anymore. And having worked in that field when I was a soldier, I know how easy it is to fake a lot of this stuff. It's not hard to come up with, intel, for example. So what we are told is that North Korea is manufacturing all this material, whether that's nuclear, whether it's ballistic, etc., and they're giving it to Russia. That is what they are saying. I'm not 100% convinced. I am convinced they're giving them artillery, loads of other equipment at the moment, which leads into why I think these officers, these 20 officers and soldiers, North Koreans, have been killed in it wasn't even Ukraine, it was actually in Russia. So the strike was in Russia. Why? What's my theory? I think what's happening is those officers, because why would there be so many officers there? And there's also some soldiers. I think they are teaching the Russians to use the North Korean equipment. That would be the most logical. I can't see any other reason, unless they are preparing to send a lot of North Korean troops. However that arrangement would work, Russia would have to give North Korea something in return, and North Korea could be sending their troops. That is probably the most likely reason for all of this. I don't know if there's any other reason. We haven't really got much else coming out. We have another quick announcement that Kim Jong-un wants to become a nuclear superpower. And he made some pretty strong statements this week, saying he would not rule out using nuclear weapons if he came under enemy attack, he calls it. And he made some pretty strong statements against South Korea as well. He said, let's see this. He said he's totally consumed by his blind faith in his master's strength. So he's obviously referring to the United States here. And he said, we've got no intention of attacking South Korea. This is what he is saying here. But he said, if we are attacked, we will use, without hesitation, all of our weapons, including nuclear weapons. So some pretty strong stuff. When certain people say we're going to nuke and use nukes, I'm often quite doubtful. But when North Korea says it, when Kim says it, I actually think he would use them. Having studied the North Korea and the military and the history, I actually think he would use them. So let's be a little bit careful with North Korea over some of the other nations. But that's you up to date today on the military stuff and what France has announced. I think it's obvious, the writing's on the wall as to what is coming in the future. 2027 is still that key year, and I can't see any reason why it wouldn't continue. So thank you so much for being online today and being a subscriber here. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.